Marcus Chen had been stationed at Outpost Kepler 442b for 3 standard months, and nobody really noticed him. He kept his head down, followed orders without question, and never caused trouble during the weekly poker games that most of the garrison attended. The other soldiers saw him as just another grunt trying to survive his mandatory service on this backwater mining planet at the edge of Alliance space. The outpost housed 237 personnel from 12 different species, all working together to extract rare minerals that powered the faster-than-light drives keeping galactic civilization running. Humans made up only 15% of the garrison, which was typical for most Alliance installations. Most species considered humans adequate soldiers, but nothing special. Certainly not worth much attention beyond basic courtesy. Marcus worked maintenance shifts in the lower levels, checking atmospheric processors and power conduits that kept the base running smoothly. His supervisor, a reptilian saurian named Kesvorth, appreciated that the human never complained about the dangerous work in the poorly ventilated tunnels. The job required crawling through spaces barely wide enough for a human frame, places where larger species simply could not go. During mealtimes, Marcus sat with whoever had room at their table, contributing little to conversations but listening carefully to everything said around him. He learned that Sergeant Thal, the Centaurian squad leader, was worried about his daughter's admission exam for the prestigious military academy on Proxima Prime. He discovered that Lieutenant Raven, one of the few other humans on base, was sending most of her pay back to Earth to support her elderly parents. He noted that the Crystallite communications officer, Harmony 7, was having trouble adapting to solid food after being reassigned from a purely energy-based colony. The alien soldiers gradually grew comfortable around Marcus because he seemed so ordinary, so harmless. They began speaking freely in front of him, discussing everything from personal problems to minor complaints about base operations. Marcus absorbed it all with the same quiet attention he gave to his maintenance reports. 3 weeks into his assignment, the base received its first real excitement in months. Long-range sensors detected an unidentified ship approaching from deep space, moving at sublight speeds but following an unusual trajectory that suggested advanced stealth capabilities. Commander Vex Korath, a massive insectoid hive mind officer, ordered the garrison to yellow alert status while they attempted to identify the vessel. The ship refused all communication attempts and continued its approach toward Kepler 442b. Its design matched no known alliance or neutral faction vessel in their databases. More troubling, their sensors couldn't get clear readings on its composition or energy signatures, suggesting technology beyond current alliance capabilities. Marcus volunteered for double shifts during the alert, working tirelessly to ensure all base systems remained at peak efficiency. While other soldiers speculated nervously about potential threats, he simply continued his duties with the same methodical calm he always displayed. Several officers noted his reliability during the stressful period, marking positive comments in his service record. The unknown ship maintained its course for 6 hours before abruptly changing direction and disappearing back into deep space, leaving the garrison with more questions than answers. Commander Vex Korath filed a detailed report with Alliance Command, but received only acknowledgement that the information had been received and classified. After the alert ended, normal routine resumed at the outpost. Marcus returned to his regular maintenance schedule, but several soldiers noticed he seemed even quieter than usual. When Corporal Dex Prime, a cybernetic-enhanced synthetic, asked if he was feeling well, Marcus simply nodded and said he was tired from the extra shifts. What none of them knew was that Marcus had spent those 6 hours doing far more than maintenance work. While crawling through the base's communication relays, he had quietly installed several microscopic monitoring devices of his own design. These tiny instruments, each no larger than a grain of sand, began recording and transmitting data through encrypted channels that bypassed the base's standard communication protocols entirely. The devices were virtually undetectable, constructed from materials that mimicked the base's existing infrastructure so perfectly that even detailed sensor sweeps would miss them. Marcus had spent weeks preparing them during his off-duty hours, using his access to the maintenance workshops to fabricate components piece by piece. As days passed, Marcus continued his routine of unremarkable service, while his hidden devices gathered intelligence on every aspect of the outpost's operations. Communication logs, duty rosters, supply manifests, strategic assessments, personal files of every soldier on base. All of it flowed through his covert network to destinations unknown. The other soldiers remained completely unaware that their quiet, reliable colleague was systematically documenting their every move. They continued to treat him as part of the furniture, a harmless human doing his job without causing problems for anyone. Some even began to consider him a friend, appreciating his willingness to listen to their problems without judgment or unwanted advice. Marcus encouraged this perception by occasionally sharing carefully crafted stories about his own supposed background. He told them about growing up on a farming colony, about joining the military to see the galaxy, about missing his family back on Earth. None of these stories were true, but they painted exactly the picture he wanted his fellow soldiers to see: a simple, homesick farm boy far from home. The deception was so complete that when Harmony 7 asked Marcus to help her understand human dietary preferences, he spent an entire evening patiently explaining different Earth cuisines and even cooking a traditional meal using base rations. The crystallite was touched by his kindness and mentioned to several other soldiers how thoughtful the quiet human had been. By the end of his 3rd month, Marcus Chen had become nearly invisible to his fellow soldiers, not through neglect, but through their complete acceptance of him as exactly what he appeared to be. They trusted him, liked him, and never suspected that their unremarkable colleague was anything more than he seemed. It was precisely the position he had worked so carefully to achieve. Lieutenant Zara Okafor arrived at Outpost Kepler 442b on a routine personnel transport, carrying orders that made Commander Vex Korath's compound eyes dim with concern. Alliance Command was conducting random security audits across frontier installations, and Zara's team would be spending 2 weeks examining every aspect of the base's operations. The announcement sent ripples of anxiety through the garrison. Security audits meant intensive background checks, detailed interviews, and thorough examinations of all protocols and procedures. Soldiers who had been bending minor regulations suddenly became very careful about following every rule to the letter. Marcus Chen received the news with the same mild interest he showed toward most announcements. When Corporal Dex Prime mentioned that security audits could result in disciplinary actions or even reassignments, Marcus simply shrugged and said he had nothing to worry about. His service record was clean, his duties were simple, and he had never caused any problems. Lieutenant Okafor was a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, with the bearing of someone who had seen action in the Outer Rim conflicts. Her team consisted of 3 specialists: a forensic accountant, a communications expert, and a cybersecurity analyst. They set up their operations in a conference room near the command center and began their systematic examination of the outpost's records. The audit team started with financial records and supply manifests, looking for discrepancies that might indicate corruption or black market trading. They found nothing unusual. The base's books were properly maintained, and all requisitions matched authorized procedures. Commander Vex Korath felt some relief that this aspect of the audit was proceeding smoothly. On the 3rd day, Lieutenant Okafor began conducting individual interviews with base personnel. She started with senior officers and worked her way down through the ranks, asking each soldier about their duties, their observations of base operations, and any concerns they might have about security or protocol violations. When Marcus was called for his interview, he appeared exactly on time, wearing a properly maintained uniform and carrying himself with the unremarkable bearing his fellow soldiers had come to expect. Lieutenant Okafor gestured for him to sit across from her at the metal table in the small interview room. She began with standard questions about his background, his duties, and his observations during his time at the outpost. Marcus answered in the same quiet, straightforward manner he used in all his interactions. He described his maintenance work, mentioned a few minor equipment issues he had resolved, and expressed satisfaction with his assignment and his fellow soldiers. Lieutenant Okafor made notes as he spoke, occasionally asking follow-up questions about specific incidents or procedures. Marcus provided clear, detailed answers that demonstrated familiarity with his duties without revealing anything beyond what would be expected from a competent maintenance worker. 20 minutes into the interview, Lieutenant Okafor's communications expert knocked on the door. She entered carrying a datapad with an expression of confusion mixed with concern. The specialist whispered something to Lieutenant Okafor, who frowned and examined the datapad's display. Marcus maintained his relaxed posture, but internally his mind was racing through possibilities. Had they detected something about his surveillance network? Had one of his encrypted transmissions been intercepted? He kept his expression mildly curious, as any innocent soldier would, when witnessing an unexpected interruption. Lieutenant Okafor looked up from the datapad and studied Marcus for several seconds. Her gaze was more intense than before, searching his face for reactions or tells that might reveal hidden information. Marcus met her eyes steadily, projecting nothing but polite confusion about the interruption. The communications expert left the room, and Lieutenant Okafor set the datapad aside. She resumed the interview, but her questions became more pointed. She asked about Marcus's off-duty activities, his relationships with other soldiers, and his knowledge of base communication protocols. Marcus answered each question with appropriate detail, mentioning his participation in poker games, his friendship with several colleagues, and his basic understanding of communication procedures from his maintenance training. He volunteered that he sometimes helped Harmony 7 with understanding human culture, and that he enjoyed listening to Sergeant Thal's stories about his daughter. The interview concluded after 45 minutes, with Lieutenant Okafor thanking Marcus for his cooperation and dismissing him back to his duties. As he left the room, Marcus caught a glimpse of the datapad screen and felt a cold shock of recognition. The display showed network traffic analysis graphs with several anomalous data streams highlighted in red. Marcus returned to his maintenance duties with outward calm, but his mind was working furiously to assess the situation. The audit team had clearly detected something unusual in the base's communication networks. The question was whether they could trace those anomalies back to his surveillance devices, and if so, how much time he had before they made the connection. Over the next 2 days, Marcus continued his routine while carefully observing the audit team's activities. He noticed that the cybersecurity analyst was spending long hours examining network logs and running diagnostic programs on the base's communication systems. The communications expert was conducting detailed interviews with all personnel who had access to sensitive information systems. Despite the growing danger, Marcus maintained his cover perfectly. He showed appropriate concern when other soldiers speculated about what the audit team had discovered, and he offered to help whenever additional maintenance work was required to support their investigation. His behavior remained so consistent with his established persona that none of his colleagues suspected anything unusual. On the 5th day of the audit, Lieutenant Okafor requested another interview with Marcus. This time, her manner was more formal, and she was accompanied by the cybersecurity analyst. They asked him to explain his access to various areas of the base, his knowledge of communication systems, and his activities during specific time periods that Marcus recognized as moments when he had installed or maintained his surveillance devices. Marcus answered truthfully about his access requirements and his maintenance schedules, while carefully omitting any mention of unauthorized activities. He described his work in the communication relays as routine system checks and minor repairs, providing technical details that demonstrated legitimate knowledge without revealing the true purpose of his visits to those areas. The interview lasted over an hour, with both officers asking increasingly detailed questions about his technical knowledge and his activities. Marcus began to realize that they were closing in on him, but he also recognized that they still lacked concrete evidence linking him to the network anomalies they had discovered. As the interview concluded, Lieutenant Okafor informed Marcus that he would be restricted to quarters pending further investigation. The restriction was presented as a precautionary measure while they completed their security review, but Marcus understood its true meaning. They suspected him but needed more evidence before making formal accusations. That evening, as Marcus sat in his small quarters under discreet guard, he reviewed his options and prepared for the next phase of what was becoming a very dangerous game. The cybersecurity analyst, a thin Volcari named Tekshen, discovered the first surveillance device purely by accident. While running a deep diagnostic on Communication Relay 7, his equipment detected an electromagnetic signature that did not match any authorized component. The signature was so faint that standard scans had missed it completely, but Tekshen's specialized detection array was designed to find exactly these types of anomalies. When they carefully extracted the device from its hiding place deep within the relay housing, the entire audit team gathered around the tiny object with a mixture of fascination and alarm. The device was remarkably sophisticated, constructed from materials that perfectly mimicked the base's existing infrastructure while containing advanced recording and transmission capabilities. Lieutenant Okafor immediately ordered a complete lockdown of the base while they searched for additional devices. Over the next 18 hours, Tech Shen's team discovered 16 more surveillance instruments hidden throughout critical systems. Each device was placed with surgical precision in locations that provided maximum intelligence value while remaining virtually undetectable. The sophistication of the surveillance network stunned the audit team. These were not crude spy devices hastily planted by amateur agents. They represented technology and expertise that exceeded most known intelligence capabilities, including those of major galactic powers. The device's ability to transmit encrypted data through hidden channels while avoiding detection suggested resources and knowledge far beyond what any ordinary soldier should possess. Commander Vex Korath called an emergency meeting with his senior staff to discuss the implications. The discovery of such an advanced espionage operation within his base was a devastating blow to base security and his own reputation. More troubling was the realization that whoever had planted these devices had been gathering intelligence for months while moving freely among his personnel. The initial investigation focused on identifying personnel with the technical knowledge and access required to install such sophisticated equipment. The list was surprisingly short. Only 7 individuals on the base possessed both the necessary expertise and the unrestricted access to the locations where devices had been found. Marcus Chen was not initially on that list. His maintenance duties gave him access to the relevant areas, but his personnel file indicated only basic technical training. According to his records, he was a simple farm worker who had received standard military technical education before his assignment to Kepler 442b. Nothing in his background suggested the advanced knowledge required to design and deploy such sophisticated surveillance equipment. However, as Lieutenant Okafor reviewed the access logs more carefully, she noticed a pattern. Marcus had been present in or near every location where devices were discovered, always with legitimate maintenance reasons that justified his presence. The timing of his visits correlated closely with the estimated installation dates of the surveillance equipment. This correlation could have been coincidental. Maintenance workers naturally visited the same systems repeatedly as part of their duties. But when combined with the network traffic anomalies that had first attracted the audit team's attention, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Lieutenant Okafor decided to examine Marcus's personal quarters, while he was restricted to the security office for additional questioning. The search team expected to find either incriminating evidence or confirmation of his innocence. Instead, they discovered something far more puzzling. Marcus's quarters were exactly what they expected from a simple farm worker turned soldier. His personal belongings were few and unremarkable: some civilian clothes, a few books downloaded from the base library, letters from family members on Earth, and standard-issue military equipment maintained in proper condition. The letters from family seemed genuine, filled with news about farming conditions and requests for him to stay safe. The books were popular fiction and basic technical manuals appropriate for his stated background. Even his personal datapad contained nothing more interesting than music files and family photos, showing a modest farm on a peaceful agricultural world. Yet something felt wrong to Lieutenant Okafor. The quarters were too perfect, too precisely arranged to match expectations. Every detail supported Marcus's cover story without any of the contradictions or complications that marked real people's lives. It was as if someone had carefully constructed a false identity and maintained it with meticulous attention to detail. The breakthrough came when Tech Shen examined Marcus's personal datapad more thoroughly. Hidden beneath layers of standard files and applications, he discovered traces of sophisticated encryption software that had been carefully erased but left microscopic digital fingerprints. The software was military-grade encryption technology, far beyond anything a maintenance worker should possess or even recognize. This discovery prompted a deeper investigation into Marcus's background. Lieutenant Okafor contacted Alliance Command directly, requesting verification of his personnel records and assignment history. The response came back within hours and sent shockwaves through the entire audit team. According to Alliance Command, No soldier named Marcus Chen matching their prisoner's description had ever been assigned to Outpost Kepler 442b. More disturbing, the personnel file they had been working from did not exist in the main Alliance database. Someone had created a completely fictional identity and inserted it seamlessly into the base's records. The audit team realized they were dealing with an infiltration operation of unprecedented sophistication. Not only had an unknown agent successfully assumed false identity and lived undetected among Alliance personnel for months, but they had also deployed surveillance technology that exceeded known capabilities of any major intelligence service. Lieutenant Okafor immediately contacted Alliance intelligence through secure channels, reporting the discovery of what appeared to be an extremely sophisticated espionage operation. The response was swift and alarming. A specialized investigation team would arrive within 72 hours to take control of the situation. Meanwhile, the false Marcus Chen remained in security custody, maintaining his innocent facade with remarkable composure. During additional questioning, he continued to insist that there had been some mistake, that his records were genuine, and that he had no knowledge of any surveillance devices. His performance was so convincing that some guards began to wonder if they had arrested the wrong person. But Lieutenant Okafor was not fooled by the act. She had seen enough evidence to know they had caught a highly trained professional operative. The question now was discovering who he really was, who he worked for, and what intelligence he had already transmitted from their supposedly secure installation. The investigation was about to enter a new phase, one that would reveal secrets far beyond anything the audit team had expected to find. As Lieutenant Okafor prepared for the arrival of Alliance intelligence specialists, she wondered what other surprises their quiet recruit might have in store for them. The base remained under lockdown as personnel processed the shocking revelation that they had been living and working alongside a master spy for months. Trust was shattered, paranoia ran high, and everyone began examining their colleagues with new suspicion. The comfortable routine of Outpost Kepler 442b had been permanently disrupted by the discovery that appearances could be fatally deceiving. The Alliance intelligence team arrived aboard a stealth frigate that materialized from subspace with all the subtlety of a thunderclap. Commander Vex Korath watched from the observation deck as the sleek vessel settled onto the landing platform, its hull still shimmering with the residual energy of emergency faster-than-light travel. 3 figures emerged from the ship, moving with the purposeful stride of individuals accustomed to handling galactic-level security threats. The team leader was a tall human woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her surroundings. Her companions included a cybernetic-enhanced synthetic and a figure whose species was hidden beneath advanced tactical armor. Commander Vex Korath met them at the airlock, his insectoid features betraying none of the anxiety that had plagued him since Lieutenant Okafor's discovery. The team leader introduced herself as Director Sarah Kane of Alliance Deep Intelligence, a division so classified that most military officers never learned of its existence. Director Kane wasted no time on pleasantries. Within minutes of arriving, she had established a secure command center and begun reviewing all evidence related to the infiltration. Her team brought sophisticated analysis equipment that made the audit team's tools look primitive by comparison. The prisoner known as Marcus Chen was transferred to a specialized containment cell equipped with technology designed to prevent any form of communication or escape attempt. Director Kane observed him through one-way transparent aluminum, studying his behavior with the intensity of a scientist examining a new species. Marcus sat calmly in his cell, showing no signs of stress or concern despite his situation. He had requested a book to read and was absorbed in what appeared to be a technical manual on atmospheric processing systems. His demeanor suggested either complete innocence or remarkable professional composure under pressure. Director Kane's cybernetic specialist, designation Unit 47, interfaced directly with the base's computer systems to trace the origins of the false identity. The investigation revealed layers of sophisticated data manipulation that had begun months before Marcus ever arrived at the outpost. Someone had carefully constructed his background, complete with fabricated service records, educational transcripts, and even fake family communications. The depth of the deception was staggering. The false identity had been inserted into multiple Alliance databases with such skill that it had passed every standard verification check. Only the deepest level analysis revealed the artificial nature of the records, and even then the investigators found no trace of who had created them. Meanwhile, analysis of the surveillance devices yielded equally disturbing results. The technology incorporated design principles unknown to Alliance science, utilizing materials and miniaturization techniques that exceeded current capabilities by several decades. More troubling, the devices had been transmitting data to relay points that seemed to exist outside known space. Director Kane called a classified briefing for senior personnel, sharing information that would normally require security clearances far above their level. The situation had evolved beyond a simple espionage case into something that threatened the fundamental security of Alliance space. The briefing revealed that similar infiltrations had been detected at 7 other installations across Alliance territory over the past 2 years. In each case, operatives using false identities had spent months gathering intelligence before being discovered through various accidents or security breaches. The pattern suggested a coordinated intelligence operation of unprecedented scale and sophistication. More disturbing was the technology angle. Every infiltration had involved surveillance equipment utilizing unknown design principles that appeared to be decades ahead of current Alliance capabilities. The implications were clear, some unknown. Faction possessed technology that could render Alliance security protocols obsolete. Director Kane informed the assembled officers that the prisoner's true identity remained unknown despite exhaustive database searches across all known civilizations. His biometric patterns, genetic markers, and even his brainwave signatures matched no individual in any Alliance neutral or even hostile faction database. This impossibility suggested either technology capable of completely altering an individual's biological identity or the existence of a civilization unknown to galactic intelligence services. Both possibilities carried implications that extended far beyond simple espionage concerns. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Unit 47 discovered hidden partitions in Marcus's personal datapad that had survived the initial analysis. These partitions contained encrypted files that required advanced quantum decryption techniques to access. The process took 18 hours and required computational resources that pushed the base's systems to their limits. When the files were finally opened, they contained detailed technical specifications for technologies that should not have existed. Faster-than-light communication systems that operated without the massive infrastructure required by current Alliance networks. Energy sources that could power entire star systems using principles that violated understood physics. Weapons designs that made current military hardware look like primitive clubs. Director Kane realized they were not simply dealing with an espionage operation, but with evidence of a technological gap that could shift the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The prisoner's knowledge of these technologies suggested either access to research facilities unknown to Alliance science, or contact with civilizations whose capabilities exceeded current understanding. The breakthrough came when Director Kane decided to confront Marcus directly with the evidence they had discovered. She entered his cell carrying a datapad displaying the decrypted technical specifications, watching carefully for his reaction when he saw the advanced designs. For the first time since his capture, Marcus's composure cracked slightly. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly when he saw the quantum communication array specifications, and Director Kane caught a fleeting expression of what might have been surprise mixed with resignation. Marcus looked up from the data pad and met Director Kane's gaze with an expression that had shed all pretense of innocent confusion. When he spoke, his voice carried a different quality, still quiet, but now with an undertone of authority that had been completely absent during his time as a maintenance worker. He asked Director Kane if she truly understood what she was looking at, and whether the Alliance was prepared for the implications of that knowledge. His tone suggested that the technical specifications were not stolen intelligence, but rather information he possessed through direct understanding of the underlying principles. Director Kane realized that their quiet recruit was not simply a spy gathering information for unknown masters. The evidence suggested he was something far more significant, possibly a representative of a civilization whose technological capabilities exceeded Alliance understanding by orders of magnitude. The investigation was about to enter its most critical phase, as both sides prepared to reveal cards they had been holding since the game began. The comfortable assumptions about galactic civilization and humanity's place within it were about to be challenged in ways that none of the participants could fully anticipate as Director Kane prepared for what promised to be the most important interrogation of her career. She wondered whether the Alliance was about to make contact with its first true technological superior, and what that contact might mean for the future of human space. Director Kane entered the secure interrogation room, carrying nothing but a simple chair and her decades of experience reading people under extreme pressure. She placed the chair across from Marcus and sat down, studying the man who had successfully deceived an entire military installation for months. Marcus looked up from the technical manual he was reading and closed it with deliberate care. When he met Director Kane's eyes, she saw intelligence that seemed far older than his apparent age, as if the young maintenance worker had been nothing more than a carefully constructed mask. Director Kane began with a simple question that carried enormous implications. She asked Marcus to tell her about Earth, specifically about the Earth he actually came from, not the one described in his fabricated personnel files. Marcus was silent for several minutes, appearing to weigh options that Director Kane could not begin to guess. When he finally spoke, his words transformed everything the Alliance thought it knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. He told Director Kane that he came from an Earth 300 years in the future, from a timeline where humanity had developed technology that made current Alliance capabilities look primitive. In his timeline, humans had solved faster than light travel without requiring the massive infrastructure that limited current galactic civilization. They had discovered energy sources that could power entire star systems using quantum manipulation techniques that current physics declared impossible. Director Kane listened without interruption as Marcus described a future where humanity had not joined a galactic alliance, but had instead developed in isolation until their technology surpassed every other known civilization. In his timeline, humans had become the galaxy's most advanced species, possessing capabilities that other races could barely comprehend. The surveillance operation, Marcus explained, was not espionage in the traditional sense. He was part of a research team studying the divergence point between his timeline and this one, trying to understand how humanity's development had taken such different paths. His mission was to observe and document the current timeline's version of human integration into galactic society. Director Kane asked how temporal travel was possible, given that Alliance science considered it a theoretical impossibility. Marcus described technologies based on quantum manipulation principles that his timeline's humanity had discovered through centuries of research beyond what this timeline had achieved. The technical details he provided were beyond her understanding, but the mathematical frameworks he referenced were consistent with advanced theoretical physics. When Director Kane asked why his people had not made contact openly, Marcus explained that temporal observation required minimal interference with the observed timeline. Direct contact could create paradoxes that might damage both timelines, potentially erasing entire civilizations from existence. His infiltration mission was designed to gather information without influencing the course of events. However, Marcus admitted that his discovery had created an unexpected problem. The deep intelligence investigation was already changing the timeline in ways his people had not anticipated. The revelation of advanced technologies, even in encrypted form, could accelerate this timeline's development in unpredictable directions. Director Kane pressed him about the other infiltration operations that had been detected across Alliance space. Marcus revealed that his team consisted of 12 temporal observers, each assigned to different aspects of this timeline's civilization. Some were studying military development, others were examining social structures, and still others were investigating technological progress. The scope of the operation stunned Director Kane. An entire civilization from humanity's future was conducting a systematic study of their own past, using infiltration techniques that had successfully deceived the galaxy's most sophisticated security systems. The implications for temporal mechanics and causality were staggering. Marcus explained that his people faced a critical problem in their own timeline. Despite their advanced technology, they had discovered that their development path had eliminated something essential that this timeline's humanity still possessed. They were trying to understand what they had lost, and whether it could be recovered without destroying their current civilization. When Director Kane asked what they had lost, Marcus described a quality that his people called integration wisdom, the ability to work successfully with other species while maintaining human identity. In his timeline, humanity's technological advancement had led to isolation from other civilizations, creating a paradox where their power had made them weaker in ways they were only beginning to understand. This timeline's humans, despite their technological limitations, had achieved something Marcus's people valued enormously. They had become successful members of a galactic community while retaining their essential humanity. His mission was to understand how this integration had been achieved and whether those lessons could be applied to his own timeline. Director Kane realized that the situation was far more complex than a simple espionage case. They were dealing with humanity's own future, attempting to learn from their past to solve problems that their advancement had created. The temporal implications were so significant that any wrong decision could affect the development of multiple civilizations across centuries. Marcus offered to share some of his people's technological knowledge in exchange for cooperation with their research mission. He could provide Alliance science with advances that would accelerate their development by decades, potentially changing the balance of power throughout the galaxy. However, he warned that such knowledge came with responsibilities that current humanity might not be prepared to handle. The offer created an impossible dilemma for Director Kane. The technological advantages could secure human dominance throughout known space, but accepting help from the future could fundamentally alter humanity's development path. They might gain incredible power while losing whatever essential quality had made their integration with galactic society possible. Marcus also revealed that his people were not the only temporal observers operating in this timeline. Other civilizations from various possible futures were conducting their own research missions, studying different aspects of current galactic development. The timeline they thought was their present was actually a crossroads, where multiple possible futures intersected. This revelation meant that every major decision made by current civilizations could influence which possible future would actually come to pass. The Alliance was not simply governing current galactic affairs, but was actually determining the shape of multiple civilizations across centuries of potential development. Director Kane found herself facing decisions that would affect not only the current Alliance, but potentially the entire future of galactic civilization. The quiet recruit had become the key to understanding humanity's place in a temporal web of possibilities that stretched across millennia. As their conversation continued, both realized they were participating in events that would determine whether humanity's future would be one of isolated technological dominance or integrated galactic leadership. The choice they made would echo across centuries, affecting civilizations that had not yet been born. Director Kane called an emergency session with the highest levels of Alliance command through quantum encrypted communication channels. The holographic conference room materialized around her, populated by the virtual presence of admirals, generals, and political leaders from across Alliance space. She was about to share information that could reshape galactic civilization. The briefing she delivered sent shockwaves through the assembled leadership. The revelation that humanity possessed a technologically advanced future timeline, and that temporal observers were studying their current development, challenged every assumption about galactic politics and human potential. Admiral Chen Voss, the human representative on the Alliance Supreme Council, demanded immediate access to the temporal technologies Marcus had described. The strategic advantages could ensure human dominance throughout known space, potentially ending humanity's position as a junior member of the galactic community. However, Director Kane warned against hasty action. Marcus had made it clear that integrating future technology into their current timeline carried enormous risks. The acceleration of human development could eliminate the very qualities that had made their integration with alien civilizations possible. The debate that followed revealed fundamental differences in how various Alliance members viewed humanity's role in galactic society. Some species had always been uncomfortable with human ambition and saw the temporal revelation as confirmation of their fears about human expansionist tendencies. Meanwhile, at Outpost Kepler 442b, Marcus was demonstrating some of his timeline's capabilities to a carefully selected group of Alliance scientists. Under controlled conditions, he used a small device no larger than a communicator to generate energy fields that defied current understanding of physics. The device created localized gravitational anomalies, manipulated quantum states at the molecular level, and generated power outputs that should have required massive industrial infrastructure. The assembled scientists watched in stunned silence as Marcus casually performed feats that their civilization considered impossible. Dr. Yelasorn, the base's chief science officer, asked Marcus to explain the theoretical principles behind the technology. His explanation involved concepts that pushed the boundaries of their understanding, describing interactions between quantum mechanics and space-time geometry that current Alliance science had never imagined. More importantly, Marcus demonstrated that the technology was not simply advanced engineering, but represented a fundamental shift in how his people understood the universe. They had discovered that reality operated according to principles that current science had not yet recognized, allowing manipulation of forces that seemed supernatural by contemporary standards. The demonstration had an unexpected effect on the watching scientists. Rather than feeling inspired by the possibilities, many felt overwhelmed by the implications of such power. The technology was so far beyond their current capabilities that they could barely comprehend its basic operation, much less its potential applications. Marcus observed their reactions with interest, noting that their response differed significantly from how his own timeline's humans had reacted to similar revelations. The current timeline's humans seemed more cautious about power, more concerned about consequences than excited about possibilities. This observation supported his mission's primary hypothesis. The integration with alien civilizations had taught current humans to consider the broader implications of their actions, while his timeline's isolated development had produced humans who pursued power without sufficient consideration of its effects on others. Director Kane returned to the base with authorization to negotiate a limited information exchange with Marcus's people. The Alliance leadership had decided to proceed cautiously, accepting some technological assistance while maintaining safeguards against timeline contamination. However, the situation became complicated when long-range sensors detected multiple ships approaching the system from different directions. The vessel's energy signatures matched no known Alliance or hostile faction designs, and their approach vectors suggested coordination despite coming from widely separated points in space. Marcus explained that the approaching ships belonged to other temporal observation teams. His discovery and the subsequent Alliance investigation had created timeline disturbances that required intervention from multiple future civilizations. Representatives from various possible futures were converging on Kepler 442b to assess the situation. Director Kane realized that their quiet little outpost was about to become the focal point for a temporal conference involving civilizations from multiple possible futures. The decisions made in the next few hours could determine which of those futures would actually come to pass. The first ship to arrive disgorged beings that appeared to be evolved descendants of the saurian species, but with technological modifications that made them barely recognizable as biological entities. They moved with mechanical precision while communicating through direct electromagnetic manipulation of the environment around them. The second vessel contained what appeared to be crystallites, but these future versions had achieved integration with quantum energy fields that allowed them to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. Their presence caused local reality distortions that the base's sensors could barely register. Additional ships arrived carrying representatives from futures where various Alliance species had taken different evolutionary paths. Some had achieved biological immortality, others had transcended physical existence entirely, and still others had developed along paths that current understanding could not categorize. Marcus served as translator and facilitator, explaining that each ship represented a different possible outcome of current timeline development. Their presence was unprecedented in temporal observation protocols, but the situation had evolved beyond standard procedures. The temporal representatives gathered in the base's main conference room, which had been hastily modified to accommodate beings whose existence operated according to different physical principles. Director Kane found herself participating in negotiations that would determine the future development of galactic civilization. The various future civilizations each presented their perspective on how current events should proceed. Some advocated for immediate technological advancement, arguing that rapid development would lead to beneficial outcomes for all species. Others warned that such acceleration would create instabilities that could destroy multiple timelines. Marcus's people held a middle position, arguing for limited technology transfer that would preserve the current timeline's integration achievements while providing tools necessary for handling future challenges. They had observed the development of this timeline for years and believed it represented the optimal balance between advancement and stability. The debate revealed that the current timeline existed at a critical juncture where multiple possible futures converged. The decisions made by Alliance leadership over the next few months would determine whether galactic civilization developed toward technological transcendence, integrated cooperation, or potentially toward outcomes that none of the future representatives were willing to discuss. Director Kane realized that humanity's role in these negotiations was more significant than their current political position suggested. Multiple future civilizations were paying attention to human choices, recognizing that human decisions would significantly influence the outcome for all species. As the temporal conference continued, the participants worked toward establishing protocols that would allow limited interaction between timelines while preserving the natural development path that had created such successful interspecies cooperation in the current era. The temporal conference reached its conclusion after 3 days of negotiations that transcended normal understanding of communication and diplomacy. Representatives from multiple possible futures had agreed upon a protocol that would preserve the current timeline's development path while providing limited assistance for challenges that lay ahead. Director Kane stood in the observation deck watching as the various future vessels prepared to depart. Each ship represented a possible outcome for galactic civilization, and their peaceful cooperation during the conference suggested that whatever path the current timeline chose, it would be supported by wisdom gained through centuries of development. Marcus approached her carrying a small device that appeared to be constructed from materials that shifted between solid and energy states. He explained that it was a gift from his people, a communication relay that would allow limited contact with his timeline for consultation on critical decisions affecting galactic development. The device would activate only during genuine crisis situations that threatened multiple civilizations, ensuring that temporal contamination remained minimal while providing access to advanced knowledge when it was truly needed. Marcus emphasized that the technology was not meant to accelerate normal development, but to serve as a safeguard against catastrophic mistakes. Director Kane accepted the device, understanding that she was receiving responsibility for decisions that could affect countless civilizations across multiple centuries. The weight of that responsibility was balanced by the knowledge that humanity's future selves believed their current timeline was capable of handling such challenges. Marcus revealed that his mission was concluding, but not in the way originally planned. The temporal disturbances created by his discovery had convinced his people that direct observation was no longer necessary. The current timeline's responses to the crisis had demonstrated the very qualities they had hoped to study. Instead of continuing covert surveillance, Marcus's people were establishing an open research exchange with the current alliance. Selected individuals from each timeline would work together on projects that benefited both eras, sharing knowledge while maintaining the temporal barriers necessary to preserve causality. This arrangement would allow Marcus to remain in the current timeline as a liaison, working openly with Alliance science while maintaining contact with his people. His cover as a maintenance worker would be replaced by an official position as Director of Temporal Research, a new department created specifically to manage the relationship between timelines. The announcement of these arrangements to the base personnel created reactions ranging from excitement to bewilderment. Soldiers who had played poker with Marcus for months struggled to comprehend that their quiet colleague was actually a representative of humanity's technologically advanced future. Sergeant Thal approached Marcus privately, asking whether the future timeline held any information about his daughter's admission to the military academy. Marcus smiled and assured him that in every possible future his people had observed, talented individuals like Thal's daughter found their way to positions where they could make important contributions to galactic society. Lieutenant Raven asked about her parents on Earth, wondering whether the advanced medical technology of the future timeline could help with their health problems. Marcus explained that while direct intervention was not possible, the research exchange program would include medical advances that could benefit the current timeline's healthcare systems, Harmony 7, was fascinated by the concept of temporal communication and asked whether future crystallites had developed new methods of energy manipulation. Marcus described some of the advances her species had achieved, inspiring her to begin research projects that might contribute to those developments. The transformation of Outpost Kepler 442b from a routine mining installation to the galaxy's first temporal research facility required massive changes in personnel and equipment. Alliance Command assigned their most brilliant scientists to work with Marcus on projects that pushed the boundaries of current understanding. Dr. Yella Sorn was promoted to head the new temporal physics department, working directly with Marcus to develop theoretical frameworks that could explain the advanced technologies they had witnessed. Their research would lay the foundation for controlled technological advancement that preserved the timeline's beneficial characteristics. Commander Vex Korath found himself commanding the most important research facility in Alliance space, hosting delegations from every major civilization as they sought to understand the implications of confirmed temporal contact. His initial anxiety about the security breach had been replaced by pride in his facility's role in galactic history. The mining operations that had originally justified the outpost's existence were expanded into industrial research programs designed to test new technologies provided through the temporal exchange. The rare minerals extracted from Kepler 442b became the raw materials for experiments that could reshape galactic civilization. 6 months after his discovery, Marcus stood in the same maintenance tunnel where he had first installed his surveillance devices. The tunnel had been converted into a sophisticated laboratory where current and future technologies worked together to solve problems that neither timeline could address alone. He reflected on how his mission had evolved from covert observation to open cooperation. The qualities his people had hoped to study and preserve had been demonstrated through the current timeline's response to temporal contact. Rather than seeking to exploit advanced knowledge for advantage, the Alliance had chosen cooperation and careful development. The temporal research exchange was already producing results that benefited both timelines. Current-era creativity and caution were helping Marcus's people address the isolation problems their advancement had created, while future knowledge was providing current civilizations with tools for challenges they had not yet imagined. Director Kane visited Marcus regularly to discuss the broader implications of their work. She had become the Alliance's primary liaison for temporal affairs, managing relationships not only with Marcus's people but with other future civilizations that had expressed interest in similar research exchanges. The success of the Kepler 442b project had convinced multiple future timelines that open cooperation was more beneficial than covert observation. Similar facilities were being established throughout Alliance space, each focused on different aspects of temporal research and exchange. Marcus often wondered whether his people had anticipated these developments when they first approved his mission. The simple surveillance operation had evolved into something that might resolve the fundamental challenges both timelines faced. Current humanity was learning to handle advanced technology responsibly, while future humanity was rediscovering the integration wisdom they had lost. As he worked alongside scientists from multiple species and time periods, Marcus realized that the most important discovery had not been technological. The temporal contact had revealed that cooperation across differences, whether species, culture, or time itself, was the key to achieving advancement without losing essential qualities that made civilization worthwhile. The quiet recruit who had once hidden among Outpost Kepler 442b's maintenance staff had become a bridge between humanity's present and future, helping both timelines achieve their potential while preserving the wisdom that made that potential meaningful. The file that no one was meant to find had led to discoveries that no one could have imagined, transforming understanding of what humanity could become while honoring what it had always been.